Can you now see my screen? Alan, I'll ask you to
Yes.
open the meeting, please.
Yes. Okay. Afternoon, everybody. Or I think if anyone's up in Queensland, it's probably still morning. So morning for anyone up in Queensland or anywhere else in Australia. Yeah, Alan Beattie, just a brief introduction of myself. I've been working with Wardy and Rowan for just over a year now, sitting on the boards of both this business, Regen Farmers Mutual and Regen Digital. Formerly a banker, and excited about what we're doing here at Regen Farmers Mutual. So this is the AGM for Regen Farmers Mutual. I just thought I'd make a few introductions and what have you, but I think first and foremost is to the acknowledgement. So I begin today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, or the lands, and pay my respects to the elders past and present, and I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that are in the meeting today. And sort of following on from that acknowledgement, I would just like to, say thanks to, those of you that are on this call who are investing in, supporting the business, and sharing in the vision that certainly Wardy and Rowan have, and I share in that vision of what it is that we're looking to do through Regen Farmers Mutual. We do have, as you can see there, 7 items for today. This is the first item, and we'll get through those, and I believe we've got about 40 minutes left for this session. But before doing so, in going into the formal agenda, Wardy just wanted me to maybe perhaps just give a couple of reflections on what I've been seeing in the last 9-10 months and some of the other activities that I undertake in the sort of financial sphere, which is what I do since I left banking last year. It's clear, I mean, I do still speak to tier 1 banks around the world, in UK, in Europe, not so much in the US, but in Singapore, Hong Kong, and in Australia. And I speak to some of the, the KPMGs and what have you of the world. And again, not just here in Australia. And then, given my former job, I'm still in touch with some family offices and some sizable family offices overseas. And it's become clear, particularly in banking, and maybe at this sort of, the COP meetings that have taken place in Glasgow and the other one recently. It's no longer a talking shop. People are not just talking about sustainability and how to ensure that business practices are making a difference in the right way for society and for businesses and what have you. So that's the first thing that has really come on the agenda. And I think pretty much every meeting that I go to, whether I'm talking about lending practices or whether I'm talking about strategies, ESG in its broadest sense and sustainability in the narrower sense is clearly an agenda item where they want to start actually doing things. The other thing I would say is, which is perhaps less recognized generally in business sort of fora, is that data and the ability to trap and use that data is something that institutions and people that are wanting to make a difference and wanting to ensure that we all do things in the right way, it's becoming a key element, because without the data you can't understand what activity is being undertaken. You can't ensure that in the supply chains the sustainable practices are being put in place. And of course, society, you, me, everybody, governments, of course, are challenging every size and facet of business to be better custodians of the land and the nature with which we interact. So those would be my sort of reflections. The final item before we go into the formal agenda from me is that, recognizing a lot of the good work that you'll see some of it today, a lot of recognizing the sort of the maturity or the fact that the business is starting to mature and we're starting to see some real progress. Wardy, Rowan, and myself in a board meeting, or a meeting that of board members, but that wasn't a board meeting actually. We discussed the need to extend the board in 2023. So we'll be moving from a board of 3 members to 5 members. That's our proposal currently. And what we want to do is make sure that that's a sort of cross-functional, multifaceted set of board members, and perhaps, you know, the 2 additional board members that we will bring on, we want to make sure that they either, will certainly personally, but also probably professionally, have a real interest, a vested interest in what it is that we are doing, and to make sure that skills such as legal skills, financial skills are brought in to sort of complement what it is that the 3 of us, you know, 3 of us have. So you'll be seeing more about that in the early part of 2023. That's it for my opening points. I believe we don't have any previous minutes, Wardy, because this is the first formal AGM. We've had other investor meetings, but not an AGM. And I also believe that there are no proxies that have been received. Correct? Okay, so with that item closed, or sorry, yes, this page. Just to note that we've had what's that, for eight board meetings since inception of RFM. And of course, the responsibilities of the directors, including of course myself, is to ensure that that appropriate governance is in place. And as I say, we're looking to extend the board to five members in the next, I would say, 3 to 4 months. That's it from me. I will go on mute unless anyone has any specific questions, but you'll hear from me again in the closing remarks. Over to you. I think it's Jim up next. Is it, Wardy?
Yeah, if it's all right, I'm going to ask James Campbell, who's been on the steering committee as the chair, to now take the spotlight and give a bit of a report from the members, if you will, before I jump into a visual report from the CEO. Over to you.
Sure, thanks, Wardy, thanks, Alan. I think the real message or point that I would convey to this discussion is really the continued governance of the transitioning from steering committee, you know, through ultimately to member council, albeit we are still at an interim member council stage. So what was the steering committee being now the interim member council is essentially in place to hold management to account, and importantly, representing effective governance that supports the spirit of the business as a member-based organisation. And I think, you know, to the credit of Wardy and Rowan, who we see every fortnight, they have respected that and continued to embrace that as they have, you know, managed in effect, you know, a startup. I haven't been at every fortnightly meeting, and I know that it is relatively optional for individuals to attend, albeit there is a regular quorum, if you like, of members. And I think that it has worked well as we have continued to assist Wardy and Rowan and other stakeholders shape the mutual. I won't say, you know, too much more from there. We are in a build stage. I think ultimately the member council itself is a stated objective and something that will become real hopefully in the next 12 months or so. The reason it isn't real at the moment and why we are at that interim stage is in effect that the member council will be represented by 8 regions. There'll be 2 nominees from each region. At this stage, the membership isn't at a capacity to draw that that out, or those individuals out, and there is also a cost incurred in in moving to that. So it's really a transition. We are partway through that transition, but you know, subject to any other members on this call and any comments they may have, that the spirit of the member-based organisation is reflected in this important point of governance that that the interim member council currently provide.
Thank you, Jim. Before I do the presentation, if anybody has a specific question for the interim member council or about the interim member council and its functions, Jim might be kind enough to address any of them. Any questions from anybody? I see that a lot of the people actually on this meeting are regular contributors to our steering committee. So, yeah, I guess we'll speak to you next Friday anyway. With I'll just take you off spotlight, Jim. I'm just going to go back and use the benefit of slides, if that's okay. Oh, I'm on a different. You get to see my Netflix, which is fun. How come I can't move to the AGM? There we go. So as you know, we started back in July 2021 with Regen Farmers Mutual becoming a company limited by guarantee. This was after we had already done 3 courses supported by the Cooperative Farming Program to design the 10 principles of the cooperative. From July to September of 2021, the first quarter of the operating of Regen Farmers Mutual, we worked closely with the Western Murray Land Improvement Group, Accounting for Nature, Farm Lab, and various stakeholders to do a pilot of what an environmental farm assessment might look like. And it was during this period that we kind of conceived of the need for a digital twin and a platform for where farmers could manage and control their data. So in September 2021, we incorporated a PTY Ltd called Regen Digital, and we gathered a waiting list and engaged a PR firm, which enabled us then to do an equity crowdfunding raise of our subsidiary Regen Digital Proprietary Limited, which closed in December of last year, having raised 500,000, 200,000 from 145 retail investors, and 3 wholesale investors put in $100,000 each. One of them being an ASX listed organisation, one a biological fertilizer company, and one a family office. At the beginning of 2022, so our 6 months into the mutual, we started to develop the product of the mutual, which is to the environmental farm assessment was what we launched with. And we launched that in June, the 3rd week of June. So at that same point in June, the steering committee turned into the interim member council, and we have since launched in June, learned a lot of lessons as the business plan has met the market. And if you'll indulge me, I'll take you through a few of those key lessons. Lesson number 1, farmers are the center of the universe for us, from a funding, from a digital, from a philosophical, from a negotiating standpoint. Our alignment with farmers is what makes the mutual have a unique value proposition. We've onboarded about 600 members, but we have a contact list of over 400 farmers that had expressed interest or have been in touch and joined a mailing list. The big change, I guess, in July 2021, we had a Liberal national government. The big talk of the town was the large margins that corporate carbon service providers were taking. And so our take to market kind of strategy was to help farmers access carbon markets without paying those exorbitant fees. In the process, we had a change of government. The world has sort of woken up to carbon through Scope 3 emissions being counted across whole supply chains. And as Alan was recently referring to, it's really affecting banking at a wholesale finance rate. If you can show your TFND or your Scope 3 emissions are carbon neutral, you can access wholesale finance cheaper. And so that is in play. And what that has meant is that we're now seeing that farmers need to prioritize becoming net zero for themselves. And in order to continue to have access to markets without penalties and potentially with additional people that they should be selling surplus carbon to, they should look then to inset to their supply chains and the organizations they work with. And then in a tertiary market, once the supply has been used by themselves first and the industries that they rely on secondary, in the tertiary market is a compulsory buyer, all those polluters. And so our whole strategy for what was the business, what was the core problem we were aiming to solve, changed in the 6 months from launch to where we are today. We've also changed the way in which we engage with support services for our members. So our initial conception was closer to an employee kind of style of consultant. We were calling them a landscape agronomist. We're now very much aware that we actually need to tap into advisor networks and form an advisor meta network, for lack of a better word, which enables that network to provide services, because there's quite a variety of services that an individual member might call upon. And that the single person having all of those related skill sets as a model isn't realistic, but members being able to rely on a trusted, certified Regen advisor in their local area or outside their local area, but with relevant skills, is what we see as a key to being able to grow further in the future. I guess we've had a few wins that are of material nature in the first 6 months. One of those has been our close relationship with the Department of Agricultural, Forestries and Fisheries. And we've been provided with opportunity to work with them on a call-up basis where they'll go, have you got half an hour? Or have you got 5 minutes for a chat in half an hour? And that has led to us being an official case study of the traceability hub within the Department of Agriculture, Forestries and Fisheries. Another one that is worth mentioning is the supply chain changes that we've seen are sort of being front run by McDonald's, who get their wholesale finance in the US and need to demonstrate their Scope 3 emissions, and are pushing down the supply chain to understand what are the emissions of the raw ingredients that end up in their patties. And they've discovered that we, through our Regen digital twin solution, can provide a way for farmers to collect and share that data into the supply chain. And we'll talk more about that in the Regen Digital AGM, if you can hold on. But the McDonald's pilot, which is all geared up for 2023, looks to be like one of multiple supply chains we would hope to work with over the forthcoming years, and looks to be a key part of our growth strategy. The development of our technology has been done in concert with an open source ethos. In America, there are 60 plus organizations that belong to a network called the Open Team, where team stands for open technology in environmental and agricultural markets. So open source software for environmental and agricultural markets, Open Team, is where we've been developing the digital twin. And it has been a fascinating learning space within that open source. The open team in the US, who we get our development and support from technology wise, were the recipient of one of the climate grants by the USDA, and now have, you know, $30+ million to invest in the open agricultural open tech ecosystem for agricultural management software. And Regen Farmers Mutual, because of our social structure, because we put farmers first, because of our work on data privacy and those sorts of things, is a bit of a darling case study for that open ag tech community. And last but not least is we've been learning a lot about the ability for Regen Farmers Mutual to bring groups of farmers together in a local area to do landscape scale interventions that can have a material, economic and environmental outcome. So I'm just going to, you know, continue to just say our collaborative strategies, our kind of philosophy is our point of difference. You will not find a carbon broker saying, do not sell your carbon. But if we started off life as a carbon broker, we are saying, do not sell your carbon. We're saying, net yourself out, look after your supply chain within setting, and then look to offsetting. I wanted to take you through just chronologically. In September this year, we launched our first landscape scale impact program in the Trap Rock in southeast Queensland. It's called Feathers Fir Forest Families and Farms, and the farmers there are, you know, revegetating boxgum grassy woodlands along the toe slopes of their very undulating country. We've been fortunate to already engage with the likes of elders and CBA with the discussion. We have 6 landscape impact programs funded in Victoria in conjunction with Landcare Victoria, and one with major sources of member acquisition, sources of lease. Regen Farmers Mutual has always been, you know, about
Sorry, is anyone else losing Wardy, or is it just me?
Yep, that's agreed.
Yeah, I thought it was me.
hello everybody.
Yes, all right.
Yeah, Wardy, you're sort of in the last 30 seconds. I don't know if you're streaming Netflix on your other window, but we've seen you cutting in and out for the last, I'd say, 45 seconds, minute or so.
Hey everybody, can you hear me? Yeah, good. All right, sorry about that. I must have lost connection. So Regen Farmers Mutual is, you know, infrastructure for farmers. That's trusted advice. It's the digital infrastructure, and it's the financial infrastructure to pull their negotiating power. And it looks like we will be creating in the first half of 2023 a fund, yet to be determined how that's structured, to complement the digital infrastructure and the advisory infrastructure that's necessary as a group to give farmers that sort of end-to-end capacity. All right, that's the end of my presentation, but I can happily pass to Rowan to do the financials, and then maybe once the financials is presented, we'll open for questions and answers before we run through the votes and close out the meeting. Rowan, are you good to go?
Absolutely.
And Rowan, I apologize for making you work when you're crook.
No, that's all right. If I'm not completely coherent in the way I express things. Apologies, but other than that, I should be fine. Just finding. You're seeing Regen Digital there, aren't you?
I'm not saying anything yet.
It was a black screen.
Mystery going on. Trying to open up the Regen Farmers Mutual. I just wanted to bring up the income statement. Can you see that?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Perfect. So this is the Regen Farmers Mutual income statement. Now, recognizing that we're in a startup mode, there's not a lot going through the accounts for the financial year, the 2022 financial year. The primary source, in fact, the only source of income through this period was under the intercompany agreement between Regen Farmers Mutual and Regen Digital. Deloitte's have done our accounts for us and kind of optimized how that revenue was paid from Regen Digital through to Regen Farmers Mutual, but that's the source of these consulting fees. So the consulting fees were paid by Regen Digital to Regen Farmers Mutual, and that then goes to cover the costs of employing Wardy, which is a key component of our of providing the services that Regen Farmers Mutual was able to provide across that period. So not a lot going on as you'd expect, which is a simple kind of matter of fact. What we can say is, well, it's not part of this meeting, is that we're transitioning to Regen Farmers Mutual having its own income stream. So you'll find that in the 2023 financial year, we're going to have revenue, for example, from the Land Restoration Fund with respect to the landscape impact project that we've got going in the Trap Rock. And so as we transition from startup to delivering landscape projects across the country, that's going to be the one source of income, primary source of income. And that the cost base will grow as we're also passing costs, not just Wardy's costs of employing Wardy and hopefully a couple of other folk, if we're able to successfully close our fundraising that we're undertaking at the moment. But we've also got Regen Farmers Mutual as the conduit through which we pay our Regen advisors. So to the degree that we receive income to support to pay for advice provided by Regen advisors, it comes via Regen Farmers Mutual and is passed through to those advisors. So not a lot to report. Unless anyone's got any questions, I'm going to stop there because there isn't, as you'd expect, a lot going on in the financial accounts of a startup, basically for the financial year 2022.
All right. Well, maybe just stop share screen and we can take questions, and then a lot, by the way, will be covered in the Regen Digital AGM that we'll dive into the two strategies around supply chains and landscape impact programs a bit more in the next AGM. But if you've got any questions, we'd love to answer them. Resounding silence.
What are we going to do for we'll have to come back at 1:30, or are we going to?
Yeah, we'll have to shut off and then come back at 1:30, like treat it as a separate meeting, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
But everyone gets an early mark for now. I really need to get rid of this bloody Netflix thing. Thank you for doing that. Any questions? Okay, so we now have a vote to do. So I'm going to launch poll, and on it you'll be asked, oh geez, I've typoed it. Anyway, it is two motions. Do you accept the papers as presented in this AGM? And do you vote to accept this year's annual financial statements? The reason it is different from what I'd put in the agenda is this is our first AGM. So accepting papers that have just been presented, isn't right. At the 2023 AGM, you'll be asked to accept the minutes from this meeting and it'll become right from future AGMs. So if you're all right with that typo, I'm going to launch the poll, and if you could vote accordingly, that would be great.
Just I think Wardy, it's correct that the poll that people now see in front of them do have the right questions and do.
I can edit them post, but I can't.
But those are the right questions.
They look correct.
Yes, that's what I'm
fine.
saying. The presentation is the old structure, but the questions you're being asked to address are the right questions.
Yes, that's correct, except for the typo in question 1. Okay, well, that's 100% votes. And I'm just gonna, you can now see the results. And I'm just gonna flick back again to you. Gosh, this is annoying. Alan.
Very good. Well, thank you, those that presented, and thanks for listening, those that were listening. I think, the fact that there were no specific questions is testimony to the, as James was saying, testimony to the ongoing engagement between those that are working within RFM and those that are invested in and are supported by and are supporting Regen Farmers Mutual. I don't really have much else to say in terms of the closing, but other than I think, as I said, it's at the outset, we're on the sort of first 2 or 3 steps of a very exciting journey, bringing together, the passion, the sort of the digital technological element of the business, the fact that we have surrounded ourselves and the businesses supporting, the cornerstone of agricultural endeavours here in Australia is entirely appropriate and extremely exciting. And yeah, it's just as I say, with maturity, we will ensure, and I will ensure, that governance remains appropriate and protects the interests of all the stakeholders around RFM. That's really all I had to say. I just caught a chat comment that's it's always good to see efficient meetings. So yes, thanks to everybody for the efficiency of the meeting. But of course, if there are improvements that you would wish to see in that regard, or as regards anything, please do let us know. I'll hand you back to Wardy, who will administer the exit and the re-entry. I think most of us, and perhaps all of us, will be back at 1:30 Sydney time.
All right, thank you, everyone. I'm just going to end this recording.